John Griffin's TV show From introduced us to not only a mysterious town that no one can locate on a map, but also gave us an eerie and mysterious forest. While you might think at first that this forest is just a backdrop, the more the show progresses, the more you realize that it's the heart of everything. From dangerous locations that would surely get you killed, to secrets that might be the ones to send all the townsfolk home, this forest is a unique character. In today's video, we will be looking at this mysterious forest and all the elements of its presence that have changed the characters' lives for the better or worse. So put on your talisman, lock your windows, and join us as we take this deep dive into the mysterious forest of From. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. A deep dive into the mysterious forest. The treacherous forest of this TV series, more commonly referred to as the woods, is the dense vegetation we see surrounding the town and the colony house. The fallen tree, which we will soon discuss, basically marks the beginning of the forest. From the moment you see that fallen tree, all the trees you see are a part of the forest. Near the town and the colony house, the forest is on the same terrain as the township. However, as you travel further and further into the forest, you will see it gets more and more hilly. While at first glance, the forest seems like a regular old outgrowth of trees, do not let that fool you. This forest has so many mysterious places, which have all played crucial roles over the 2 seasons. In the pilot episode of the show, the first thing we learn about the woods is that it is not safe to remain there after dark. In this episode, we follow the Matthews family, who see the fallen tree with crows circling over them. Unable to move the tree out of their way, they turned their RV around and tried to get back on the highway. But no matter how much they drove, they kept coming back to the mysterious township. After looping on the road that takes them nowhere for a few times, Jim decides to turn the RV around and drive in the opposite direction. This caused them to encounter another speeding vehicle on the road. This was an Audi. To save themselves from a brutal crash, both the cars swerved to avoid each other, and in the end, they crashed into the trees. When the Audi ran into a tree, the RV completely toppled over. Jim was stuck in the driver's seat with a tree penetrating through the windshield. Tabitha, his wife, was unconscious. While Julie, his daughter, did not get hurt that badly, his son, Ethan, ended up getting a table leg through his thigh. Luckily, Boyd, the sheriff of the town, and others came to their rescue. While Julie and Tabitha went back to the colony house with Jade, Jim remained back in the RV with Boyd and Christy to help his son. As daylight ended, he heard animalistic screams from the woods, followed by the creatures knocking on the RV window. As Boyd explained, these creatures called the woods their home, and that is why the woods were not safe for them. As the season progresses, Boyd struggles with his decision about Frank. For those who don't know, Frank was one of the residents of the town who was an alcoholic. His addiction made him a negligent father. He did not nail the window shut in his daughter Megan's bedroom, and one night, while Frank was passed out in the bar, Megan was coaxed into opening the window by one of the creatures. She and her mom were brutally killed by the creatures. Ever since becoming the sheriff, Boyd created some rules for the townspeople to follow. These rules were supposed to be to protect each other. Since Frank's negligence caused the death of his wife and kid, he was supposed to be punished. The punishment is being sent to the box, a confined area in the middle of the town with no talisman to protect him. If Frank is sent to the box, it would be the first time the punishment is ever used. This is why Boyd is seen struggling with that decision. When talking with Father Treachery did not help him out, Boyd decided to go and give Frank a talisman. He asked Frank to go live in the shack and make a life there for himself. However, in the end, Frank chose to go to the box. All the people he loved were dead, and he simply wanted to see them again. We also get to see a budding friendship between Victor, the oldest resident of the town, and Ethan. Ethan saw a boy all dressed in white while he was resting in the colony house, recovering from his injuries. So when he finally managed to step outside the colony house, he decided to ask Victor, who was seen measuring the distance between the trees and the colony house, about the boy. At first, Victor is extremely uninterested in having a conversation with Ethan. But after the latter mentions the boy in white, Victor gets curious. This leads Victor to sneak Ethan away into the woods to look for the boy in white. In there, Victor showed Ethan the Farway trees, a special kind of tree present in the woods. Jim and Tabitha eventually enter the forest in search of Ethan when they notice him missing. However, they soon find themselves surrounded by a pack of barking dogs. Luckily, Victor showed up at the right moment and scared the dogs away with his gun. These dogs, as we will soon find out, tend to show up out of nowhere in the forest. They seem pretty helpful so far, but we don't know where they actually come from. Over the 2 seasons of the show, all of the inciting events end up happening either in the forest or because of the forest. Don't believe me? Well, let's take a look at all the different locations we've come across so far in the 2 seasons that belong to the forest. Mysterious places in the forest. Starting this list strong, we have fallen tree. As I mentioned, the fallen tree marks the edge of the forest. This is a huge uprooted trunk which has fallen in the middle of the road. It's too heavy to be moved. That's why almost everyone who sees the fallen tree has no option but to turn around. When they do turn around, they end up trapped on a road that leads to nowhere except the town. The tree is usually surrounded by a murder of crows flying ominously over the tree, which gives the viewers an eerie sensation almost immediately. Now here's a fun fact about this tree. You cannot see this particular tree from inside the town. You only see it when you're about to enter the town for the first time. So basically, it's a gateway. Everybody sees the tree with the crows, and accepting that is usually the first step for adapting to the town lifestyle. In season 1, we get to see the fallen tree for the first time when the Matthews family come across it on the road. They're on their way to the Grand Canyon when they see that their road is blocked. While Jim and Tabitha were brainstorming about what to do with the tree, and they noticed the group of crows over their heads, they decided it would be best to leave immediately. They get in their RV and turn back, but it's far too late. They're already trapped. They keep driving and end up entering the same town over and over again. Usually, only one car enters the township at a time. However, this time, another car ended up getting trapped there, and that vehicle was the one with Jade and Toby. At first, like most people, Tabitha could not believe anything that anyone was telling her. But later that night, when Donna sat her down and explained her story, starting from seeing the fallen tree, Tabitha realized that this was not a cruel joke. This is happening. In the second season, we see a bus full of passengers arriving in town. This Grand Rapids Runner bus, driven by Bacta, also encountered the fallen tree and decided to turn around. Now, you might think that every time we see the fallen tree, it must be the same one, right? Well, not really. In the series, we get to see the fallen tree 2 times, and each time, it's a whole different tree. So maybe there are quite a few fallen trees, like we have quite a few Farway trees. Let's talk about them now.
Go.
A Farway tree.
What is
Farway trees. You will notice very quickly that in the forest that surrounds the township, most trees are rather slender. However, out of several such slender trees, sometimes you would come across a thicker tree with roots wrapped around it just like veins wrapped around an organ. These thick trees have a huge hollow in their trunks. They are known as the Farway trees. In the first season, we are introduced to the Farway trees by Victor as he and Ethan venture deep into the woods in search of the boy in white. When they come across a large tree like this, Victor calls it a Farway tree. Instead of telling Ethan what this tree does, Victor shows it to him. He picks up a rock from the ground and draws a smiley on top of it. Then he chucks the rock in the hollow of the trunk. A moment later, the rock ends up falling at their feet, with the smiley and everything from the sky. Ethan is amazed at this display, and let's be real, so were we. Victor explained that this property of Farway trees, working as a teleportation checkpoint, works for people too. However, the only problem is that you never know where these Farway trees will take you. Almost to prove this sentiment, in the later episodes of the season, we actually see it happen. One of the members of the colony house gets seduced by one of the creatures. She coaxed the colony house guy to open the window because she really wanted to touch him, taste him. Like most fools in love, the guy opens the window, and as you can guess, he gets killed pretty soon. The creature leaves the window open, allowing more of them to climb in and launch launch an attack on the colony house. Now, unlike others, Victor knew something bad was going to happen. He was mentally prepared with his escape plan. Luckily, Julie, who was emotionally distraught right before the attack happened, went to Victor's room for some privacy. So when the attack happened, along with Victor, Julie climbed out of the colony house, pretty safe and sound. Amid the chaos, Julie was not sure where she was supposed to go, but Victor saw the boy in white pointing towards the forest. So, despite Julie's hesitation, she decides to follow Victor into the forest. Together, they reached the Farway tree closest to the colony house, and Victor asked Julie to step in first. Julie steps into the Farway tree and ends up in the Root Cellar at the edge of the town, while Victor is nowhere to be seen. In the first season finale, we finally learn that Victor had been teleported by the Farway trees into the cave system that ran underneath the town. Similarly, in the season finale, we saw Sarah and Boyd stepping into the Farway tree, as pointed out by the boy in white. They had been out in the woods for a day or two, and Boyd got bitten by a spider. With him completely delirious and a huge storm approaching, Sarah knew they needed to find shelter as soon as possible. That's why when the boy in white pointed out the Farway tree, she readily pushed Boyd into it. Boyd ended up getting trapped in the dry well of the dungeons, whereas Sarah ended up in the church basement. While all these Farway trees we have seen so far seem to transport humans to different places, Victor mentions a special Farway tree known as the Bottle Tree. But before we learn more about the Bottle Tree, let's learn a little bit more about the place where Boyd ended up getting stuck. Dungeon. When we see Boyd at the end of Season 1, stuck in an extremely tight tunnel, we definitely do not imagine this place being the main culprit behind the horrors of the second season. At least I did. So, the dungeon that we see in the second season is the lair of the Music Box Monster. This entity is the main villain that Boyd and everyone in the town have to go up against in the second season. So what happened after Boyd found himself in the dry well? Well, at first, Boyd tries to climb out of the wreck on his own. When he finds out he cannot, he tries calling out for Sarah, who is supposed to be right behind him, but he does not get any response. Right when Boyd thinks all hope is lost, he hears a voice asking him if he is real. Boyd reassures the voice, and this stranger agrees to help him if he helps the person back. Boyd agrees, and a rope is thrown down to him. Using it, Boyd manages to climb out of the dry well and finally sees the dungeon in its full glory. He sees 3 people shackled to the dungeon walls. 2 of them have already passed away, turning into skeletons. The one who is alive, this extremely emaciated man, happens to be the voice that Boyd heard. This guy is Martin, who seems to have been trapped here for a long time. Martin asks Boyd to kill him, but Boyd refuses. Instead, he tries to save Martin, breaking his shackles and whatnot. However, as he is doing that, a music box appears in the corner of the dungeon and starts playing a haunting tune. Martin tells Boyd to run away before the music ends, but Boyd refuses to leave without Martin. Eventually, when the music ends, Martin attacks Boyd. He cuts Boyd's arm and presses his hand on the cut, giving his blood worms to Boyd. Then, Martin immediately dies. The dungeon vanishes in a moment, and Boyd finds himself standing in the ruins with a torch in his hand. Using the torch, Boyd manages to go back to Clary's canned goods truck, where he takes shelter for the night and keeps the torch. Later in the season, this music box monster takes 3 victims, Julie, Marielle, and Randall. To save them, Boyd decides to ask Sarah for help. Sarah, Boyd, and Kenny venture into the woods and reach the ruins of the dungeon. Sarah immediately says that she can hear the music box, even though we cannot see it. The more she hears the tune, the more disturbed she becomes. She tells them that she can hear the 3 victims screaming, and the entity needs the victims to stay. The entity is laughing at Boyd for bringing it to town, and it gets just as excited when it touches Kenny's arm. The entity wants to hurt them, and when the 3 victims die, it will be too late. Sarah ends up with a nosebleed and keels over in pain, but manages to croak out that Boyd needs to stop the melody, even though she does not know how they can do it. Eventually, Boyd figures out that he can return to the dungeon using the torch. He gets it back from the trunk and lights it up at the ruins, and the dungeons reappear. Abby's apparition shows up, trying to stop Boyd from breaking the music box, but Boyd does not listen. Using the torch, he smashes the music box to smithereens, and the victims are saved. Talisman Cave. While Boyd feels like he doesn't do a good job at saving people, just like Donna said, he did manage to do that over the years, especially after he found the Talisman Cave. So in his early days, Boyd went out into the forest to forage. However, as the nightfall came quickly, Boyd found himself lost in the forest. He had no idea where he was and how he could go home. He could hear the creatures screaming, and he desperately needed a shelter to hide in. He found a cave nearby and decided to take shelter there. As the night darkened and the creatures came out of the forest, Boyd was sure that they would rip him apart. He had his gun trained on them as they walked towards the cave. However, the creatures, for some reason, did not enter the cave. Looking around the cave, Boyd noticed a bunch of rocks with particular symbols drawn on them. Realizing that they acted like creature repellent, he brought them back into town the next morning. These are what we know as the talismans. Before the talismans, everyone in the town survived the night by hiding somewhere and praying the creatures didn't find them. However, now, with the talismans, they could finally remain safe inside four walls at night without worrying about hiding. As long as the talisman was hanging from somewhere and the human inhabitants of the enclosed space did not open the door to invite the creatures in, they were safe. That is why when Boyd and Sarah decided to venture out into the forest together in search of answers, Boyd made his first base at the Talisman Cave to ensure both safety and security. Bottle tree. This particular tree is a Farway tree, but a special one at that. So far, we've seen that Farway trees usually guide different people to different locations. However, when it comes to this particular Farway tree, it only directs the people to one location, the lighthouse. This tree is adorned with several glass bottles hanging from its branches. Now, in Season 1, we do get to see a bottle tree, but this one doesn't seem to be a Farway tree. It's much thinner. When Boyd and Sarah went inside the forest, they heard the clinking of glass bottles in the wind, which directed them to this tree. Despite Sarah seizing from pain the moment Boyd tried to get one of the bottles down, Boyd did get his hands on one of them. Inside, there was a piece of paper with 1864 written on it. In the second season, we get to learn more about the bottle tree from Victor. So Victor's mother, Miranda, wanted to save the children, so she hid Victor and Eloise in the Root Cellar and went out in search of the lighthouse. She told Victor that she would be going to the bottle tree. Eloise soon followed Miranda, and Victor could not go after his sister or mother due to his fear. The next morning, when he came out of the Root Cellar, he found everyone in the town dead. When he looked for his mother, he found her lying lifeless in front of the bottle tree. The creatures got to her right before she managed to get in. After Julie became a victim of the music box monster, Tabitha decided that she would venture out to the lighthouse. She thought that saving the kids could be the way to save Julie. With Victor's guidance, Tabitha entered into the Farway tree, which transported her to the entrance of the lighthouse.
दूसरा कोई रास्ता नहीं।
Lighthouse. Normally, a lighthouse is located near the seashore, helping guide vessels back to safety. Perhaps that's why it's so bizarre when we find out the bright light Boyd and Sarah saw in the middle of the night came from this mysterious lighthouse. It is located deep in the forest, and it should take about a day's journey on foot to reach it. Unless, of course, you use the bottle tree that transports you directly to the lighthouse. From the first season, quite a few people got visions about the tower, especially Tabitha. When she was climbing up the stairs after Jim called her for dinner, she saw herself ascending the stairs of the tower. She also hears a ship's horn. Almost not noticing anything amiss, she calls out to Ethan to clean up after himself when she sees Ethan's toys on the ground. She climbs further up and sees Jim's body hanging from the ceiling. Jim opens his mouth to scream, but a car honk comes out, reminding Tabitha of the RV crash, and she wakes up from her nightmare. In this dream, she sees several years etched onto the lighthouse wall, including 1864, the same year written inside the paper Boyd found on that bottle tree. Later, in the second season, Tabitha is plagued by the visions of the ghoulish children. At first, she thinks that they want to hurt her. However, after she hears about Victor's mother's experience, she figures that maybe the kids want her to help. Maybe that would be the way they can all go home. So with Victor's guidance, she goes inside the bottle tree and ends up at the lighthouse. She climbs up the lighthouse, and the young kids keep saying, "Ankui eerie over and over again. When she finally reaches the top of the lighthouse, she sees that the town is nestled in the middle, with hills surrounding them in all directions. Before she can look at the view more, the boy in white shows up, apologizing to Tabitha and pushing her off the lighthouse window. When Tabitha wakes up again, she is back in the normal world, implying that falling from the lighthouse is probably the only way to go home for now. Root Cellar. The Root Cellar, as we all come to see, happens to play a very crucial part in the town's history. It's a storage area that is mostly never used by the people and lies right on the outskirts of the town. Sometimes, when people are out in the dark and need a hiding place from the creatures, they use the Root Cellar. While in the first season, this is marked as the first place where Jade gets his first jump scare and sees the symbol for the first time, as we learn more about the history of the townspeople, we come to know that the Root Cellar is very much intertwined with Victor. Victor got trapped in the town when he was very young. His mother told him to hide in a place that Christopher, the guy in the 1980s who saw the symbol, did not know about. So Victor and Eloise hid there. After asking them to be brave and look out for each other, Victor's mother went out of the Root Cellar to save the children in the lighthouse. However, soon after their mother left, Eloise followed, leaving Victor all alone. Victor stayed inside the Root Cellar until dawn, and when he stepped out, he found everyone in the town had been massacred. Jade, after waking up in the colony house, believes this whole town is an escape room. So while he's riding about town, he enters the Root Cellar, hoping to get some clues. That is where he finds a bloody body with a boulder on top of it. The corpse faces Jade and screams, which shocks Jade. This is when he saw the symbol that drove Christopher pretty much insane on the ceiling. He returns back to the place with Kenny, but Kenny does not believe him at all. When Victor sends Julie inside the Farway tree during the attack on the colony house, Julie ends up here, where she can wait out the night safely. In season 2, after getting the bloodworms in his body, Boyd starts seeing visions of a ballerina dancing around him. While making his way to the forest, Boyd suddenly heard the music box and saw it on a nearby rock. The Root Cellar door opened, and the ballerina stepped out, dancing gracefully around Boyd after smiling at him. The dance entrances Boyd for a good minute before Kenny manages to snap him out of it. Shack. We heard Boyd tell Frank to live in the shack, but what is the shack? Well, it's a wooden shack located near the edge of the forest. It can be used as a temporary shelter, with a talisman, of course. When Boyd and Sarah decided to go back into the forest for their journey, he told Sarah to wait for him in the shack. That's because after she tried to hurt Ethan and accidentally ended up killing her brother, Father Treachery, who saw the whole thing, told everyone that Sarah had escaped into the forest. Boyd eventually returned to the shack with his son Ellis, who was following him, hoping to find the courage to say something. Ellis was mad at Boyd because he prioritized looking for answers after getting trapped in this town. Instead of spending time with Abby, who was slowly slipping away, Boyd kept staying outside for longer and longer periods, hoping to solve the issue. Eventually, Abby's mental health deteriorated to the degree that she went on a shooting spree, thinking that would be the best way to wake everyone up. Boyd had to shoot Abby dead before she could kill Ellis. Ellis blamed Boyd for Abby's behavior for a long time, but after surviving the attack at the colony house using the talisman his father found, Ellis came to realize that the man was not that bad. He didn't blame his father for Abby's actions anymore, and they hugged each other. Ellis was scared that this would be the last time he would see Boyd, and he didn't want him to leave without a proper goodbye. That's when Ellis noticed that Sarah was in the shack, and Boyd told him that he would explain everything once he was back, and not reveal Sarah's location to anyone. With Ellis's word, Boyd handcuffed Sarah, and off they went into the forest. Brundles. Despite the weird name, the Brundles refers to the lake near the colony house that the inhabitants used to have fun in. In season 1, Fatima and Ellis take Julie to the Brundles, where Ellis takes a bath. This shows Julie how, despite the awful conditions that the inhabitants were living in, they managed to maintain a semblance of normalcy. This fascinated Julie, as she could not imagine remaining positive in such dire conditions. When asked, Fatima shared her backstory and explained that while monsters are always out there in the world, she would not let them scare her. Right after this conversation, Julie, Fatima, and Ellis are found by Ethan on their way back to the colony house after almost getting killed by Sarah. After the passengers of the Grand Rapids runner bus arrive in town, Fatima is the one who's in charge of helping Elgin adjust. Elgin asks Fatima about a nearby water body, and she takes him to the Brundles. Elgin states that he saw the Brundles in his dream. That prompts Fatima to say that one of the previous members, Nadia, used to say that this town calls out to people. Only a very few manage to hear those calls. They are the ones who get all the strange dreams and premonitions. However, obsessing over them would not do any good, as no one could come up with answers. Clairy's canned goods truck. This delivery truck is present right in the middle of the forest after getting stuck in the township at some point. Victor manages to turn it into a hideout for himself. After he and Tabitha escaped the tunnels, they went through the forest to reach the truck to wait out the night. Tabitha asked Victor about the boy in white and how Victor arrived in the town in the first place. Victor answers her questions very politely, without giving us much information, and then shares a box of chocolate chip cookies with her. He talks about how there used to be more snacks there, but new people have not come here in a while. Eventually, they hear banging on the truck, and opening it up, they see Boyd. Following Boyd, Elgin arrives at the truck, begging to be let inside. The creatures are seen closely stalking Elgin, so Boyd lets him in. As Boyd doesn't know about the bus, he's confused when Elgin talks about it. Later at night, Boyd talks about how he never thought this was a hideout, even though he had crossed the truck so many times. He talks to Victor more about his drawings, and amidst these small talks, the night ends. In the morning, Boyd learns about the number of passengers on the bus and what kind of chaos ensues, with Donna to prepare for his duty. Right after he leaves the truck, he feels the worms under his skin. Victor is seen staring at him, but Boyd simply tells him to close the truck and move on. Later, when Boyd finally figures out how to go back into the dungeon, he goes to the truck to retrieve the torch he was carrying with him. There, he was confronted by a shotgun-wielding Reggie, who blamed Boyd for all the problems as his partner passed away in his sleep. Boyd tries to tell Reggie that he can fix everything, but Reggie shoots him in the shoulder, forcing Boyd to shoot him dead. Car graveyard. This is a clearing in the forest where several cars are seen parked for years and years. When Victor got out of the Root Cellar and saw everyone dead, he drove all the cars away to this clearing so that he would not have to look at it. According to his words, there are older cars beyond the rocks that surround the edge of the graveyard. The cars we can see are all from the 60s and 70s. So that makes me wonder if we could see cars from the 40s and 50s beyond those rocks. I mean, if the dates etched on the lighthouse walls are anything to go off of, we should see those types of cars there as well. The first time we see the graveyard is when Victor agrees to help Jade with the symbol. He brings his mother's violin and tells Jade to play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star for him while he sits on top of her mother's car, just like his mom used to. Once Jade's done, Victor explains that the man in the picture, whose journal is full of the symbol that Jade is obsessed with, is named Christopher. Christopher was a friendly guy and made people laugh. However, one day, he changed and stopped smiling. Then, one night, his mother told him to hide in a place that Christopher didn't know about. The next morning, Victor woke up and found everyone dead. The next time we see Victor at the car graveyard, he brought Tabitha with him. He was afraid to remember a lot of things, but with Tabitha's encouraging words, Victor opened the trunk of his mother's car. The pictures that were there turned out to be drawn by his sister, Eloise, who he suppressed the memories of. While it's clear that Victor feels guilty for not going after Eloise that night, Tabitha notices the lighthouse in one of Eloise's drawings. That is when Victor revealed that on that fateful night, his mother was going to the lighthouse to save the children locked in the tower. Marvelous verdict. So there you have it, guys. All the spooky places are present inside the forest that surrounds the township. While we don't know a lot about each of these places, it's very clear that the forest has a lot of hidden answers that are crucial for solving the mystery of the town. Which element of the forest, in your opinion, holds the most importance? Let us know in the comments down below. I personally think the element that plays the biggest role has to be the lighthouse. Until next time, take care. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.